Hey everybody, this is Trevor from Hollenback Shearing. I'm just going to do a brief overview of my shearing rig that I use when I'm shearing. There have been some requests to see how it all fits together. Just a quick background, I learned how to shear in New Zealand and then traveled to Austria in Europe, not Australia. A lot of people get that confused. And sheared over there with somebody who used sand similar to this. So I learned that in Europe, and then I came back and just kind of reverse engineered it as I built mine based on what I remembered. I took a few measurements when I was there, but nothing major. So the basics are this. Down here we have like the main parts of the stand. There are two halves here that you see the woods on top of, and those are on top of, that's the platform that I shear on. Underneath there's a metal frame that holds it all together. Right here you can see the metal frame that I constructed. This is all square tubing that I welded together just to make a nice solid platform for the wood to go on. You don't want the space between these supports to be too wide depending on the plywood or platform material you're using, because if you do have it too wide or the platform wood is too thin, it'll bow between these as you're stepping on it. Some people might not care, but I didn't want that, so I used a balance between having wood that wasn't too thick and a structure that wasn't too complex to kind of balance the two. I didn't want to have to haul around a super heavy platform, so I didn't use really thick plywood. I actually did initially and decided it was way overkill. This is, so this is 1/4 inch plywood, and I think they are, should be 2x4. Let's make sure. So I'll give you guys. Yeah, so they're just each half is 2x4. So it should, when you're done, come out to be a square 4x4. But I'll just show you guys real quick how it goes together. So I've got, on the two platforms here, I've got a male half and a female half. Underneath they're identical, as you can see here, except in the corner I have this brace, because that's where the upright goes. This is just to stabilize it so it doesn't torque bend up the platform too much. You'll see what I mean when I put it together. But other than this supporting beam in the corner where the post for the motor goes, they're identical. So I'll go ahead and put them together and show you guys. If you want to bring it closer and just show, before I put this down, I'm going to show you how I mounted the wood. Once this is set up, you won't be able to see it. I just got some angle iron, and in 4 spots on each half, I mounted some angle iron and drilled a hole through it so that I could mount the wood using replaceable hardware. This is just a hex head machine bolt with a nylock washer, or a nylock nut, and a lock washer. That hasn't come loose at all over the course of using it for a few years, so that's a pretty sure way of doing it. Otherwise, just use some Loctite on these and you won't have to sit there and tighten them every time you go to use it. On the top, I set the bolt heads, I set them flush with the board so my feet wouldn't get caught on them when I'm shearing. You don't really want anything under your feet when you're shearing, and you don't want things to get caught on, so I just used a Forstner bit to hog that out before drilling the hole for the bolt itself, and then just dropped a washer in there underneath. So it's sandwiched in there pretty tight. So the way these two go together is, you'll see here, there's a wing nut and another bolt here. These are what hold the halves together, so these are just there for storage currently, but you'll see how they go together here. So take these apart on both sides. There's one on each side. Basically 2 female slots here, and then the other half of the board, there are 2 male posts. And you just drop it right in. As you can see on the fit here, you want to get tubing that is pretty much just one size down from the tubing you're going into, so that there's not a lot of play. You don't want a ton of play in the male and female ends going in, because once you go to put this in, you don't want it to be wobbling around or wiggling. So once you've got it in there, you just drop each bolt through and tighten the wing nut on. And these, it's not going to wiggle too much when you're shearing, so you don't need to worry about this coming apart. Some people just use nails, like in Austria, they just use nails. They're not really gonna, you're not walking all over the barn with this board, so it's not gonna come out. But if you want to not worry about it, just use a bolt and a wing nut, or just a regular nut. Okay, so once those are together, this is one piece for all intents and purposes. Drop it down, and that's your shearing platform. Okay, so as you can see, it doesn't really bow too much because of how many supports I have going through there and how thick the wood is. At the corner of the platform here, this is what I've constructed to be basically the support that holds up these two posts I'm going to show you in a second that holds the motor. So it's pretty simple. It's just round tubing. I reinforced it a little bit with angle iron here to attach to the frame down here. You can see the awful welding in there that I did. You don't need to be a master welder to do something like this, but your welds do have to penetrate and be really structurally sound because you're going to be holding a lot of weight over your head. And then just two flat bar supports on each side, running roughly 45 degrees. I mean, the higher you can get them, the better, but if you put a support from the top of this, or you have this tube higher than it is here, which is, this tube is about 12 inches tall. If you have these higher than this, the higher you make these supports, the stronger it'll be, but you're also going to have things in the way of your feet. If you have a big sheep, you're going to be rolling off the side of this board here and there throughout the process, and having something as low profile as possible is ideal. This tube here is the one that goes first. Now, I did a combination of round tubing and square tubing. Okay, I did round tubing on the bottom. It would have been fine just to do square tubing throughout the whole thing, if I knew I didn't want to have to, or I didn't want the ability to rotate my motor side to side. Sometimes you're in positions where there's not any overhead clearance. You need to rotate the motor a little bit away or a little bit in towards your board. It's nice to have that pivoting ability of the round tubing on the bottom, so that's why I did it that way. I really don't ever set it other than perpendicular to my shearing surface though, or parallel to this rather. You'll see when I drop the other one in, but I have this this nut here that I welded after drilling a hole through the tubing. There's a nut here welded in, and I just took a bolt and then welded, as you can see here, this is just like a carriage bolt that matches with that nut, and I just welded a piece of metal bar across. It's just so I could do it with my hands really fast. If you're setting up and breaking down for a lot of jobs, you're not going to want to sit there with a wrench and a hex head trying to take apart your stuff. So just attach this. It just needs to be hand tight. I mean, this is really just preventing it from swiveling, so you don't need to worry about this one so much. So just hand tight is fine, and then you can disassemble a lot faster. The next piece is kind of the same thing I showed you with the frame, where each part of the platform mates to each other. There's a larger piece of square tubing here, which is your female end, and this is going to be your male end. The reason this is split into two pieces is so that I could break this down and put it in a small vehicle. I drive a Honda Fit currently, and that's been my shearing rig, driving around shearing since I started shearing in the U.S. So if you have a small vehicle, this part is pretty important and necessary, as is making sure that the platform is collapsible into two halves, because I can't fit a 4x4 piece of wood or a 4x4 platform in the back of my car. It's just not big enough. So if you have a pickup truck, a lot of this stuff won't matter. You could even set up just a piece of tubing like this with an extendable, or even just a fixed height piece of tubing, and hook it up to your trailer hitch if you have a truck. And then you don't even have to have this thing that plants into a platform below you that acts as the ballast. Your vehicle would be the ballast. But in this case, I wanted a platform that could go anywhere, so this is why I built it this way. Once this part's in, again, you just want it one size lower than whatever size you're using for your upright, so that it can mate with it and move freely. I did the same thing as I did down here, up here with these two bolts with nuts attached to each side. To two sides, sorry, there are two sides on this square tubing that are bare. There's one on one side and one on the other side that tighten the tubing down. So I don't recommend tightening it. If you're kind of short, don't tighten it until you have your motor on here and it's set, and I'll show you how we do that in just a second. First, I'll actually come around here real quick. It might be easier to see. the mechanism I have for actually holding the motor on here. So what I did was I got my motor here, and I just made a custom bracket here, right, on the side of the motor that go through the holes that you would use for like a commercially made bracket to mount this in a barn or wherever. I just made a custom one to go through the existing holes on the motor. That's where it's strongest, that's what it's designed to do, so that's what I did. I wouldn't really make anything that just slips through here and holds onto it. It's not really gonna be stable. Use the 2 holes that are already in the top shell of your, the cover of your machine. So I made these brackets that go on each side and have square tubing welded in the middle of it that will go over this, that will fit over this, and you'll see in just a second. But again, this is, I mean, all of this from the ground up. The bottom part, if your welds are kind of so-so, it's probably not a big deal in terms of mating the wood to the metal. But everything else structurally has to be welded really, really solidly. Otherwise, you put yourself in a position where something might buckle, and this is a very heavy piece of equipment you don't want coming down on your head. So what I have here above here is just a little lever, like basically a latch actually, that's secured with a cotter pin. You can pull that out. This thing swings up and down and goes over the bracket of the motor so that it can't come off once it's on there. So you'll see if you want to, yeah, we'll switch places. Side. So once this goes on like this, right, I've got a little stop welded in here. You can see below here, I've got a stop here that I just welded with a little flat bar. And you want to add, if the fit between this male end and this female end here is kind of loose, add some flat bar or something around it to make sure it's a relatively tight fit. That way your motor's not going to wiggle around as you're using it. So push it on there till it stops. And the placement of that stop is based on this. If you want to get above here, looking in here, you can see that come around here. There you go. You can see where the stop on the bottom stops the bracket is right where it's flush with the male end of the mount. Okay, so then when this part comes over on this little swivel, it just traps it so it can't come off. Okay, and then this is probably not necessary, but I have it on there anyway. I can't think of something that would lift this up except for a human hand. But just put it on there anyway. That way that's locked on there, and there's no way this thing's gonna slide off while you're shearing and drop onto the floor and break, or drop onto you or a sheep or someone helping you. Once you've got that on there, that's the point at which I would then lift it up to go ahead and mount your drop tube. This piece right here, just like a brief aside on this, I don't have my back aid with me right now, but this is the mount for the back aid. I just welded a piece of circle tubing or round tubing to the upright, and then this part, which is the arm to which you would attach your back aid. If you don't know what a back aid is, it's basically a sling with springs that mounts above you. You put it around your waist, and that way when you're leaning over, it's pinned to the top there, and those springs help keep your back up a little bit. So if you're getting fatigued over the course of a day, back aid can be a big help. I use it on really big jobs. On small jobs, I don't use it because it's just kind of a cost benefit of the time it takes to set it up. Use it. So if it's only a few sheep, it doesn't matter. But when you get into a big flock, then you're probably going to want to attach that. And the reason you do, again, the round tubing here is because as you shear, you move, and you want this to be able to move with you, so that you're not tugging on the top of the support here with your back aid as you're trying to reach a leg or do something else. So I'll just leave that up there so you can see what it looks like. Once you've got this mounted, just go ahead and you would raise this up to the desired height. Now, if you don't know what your desired height is, you should set it and make a mark on here so that you're not going like this and holding this heavy thing above you while you're trying to figure out right where you want it. So I have a little line mark there, so I know, oh, okay, I'm at the height I want without having to mount my down tube and check its distance from the floor. These you want pretty snug. You shouldn't need like a mallet or a hammer to get them loose, but get them pretty tight. And once that's set, then you can put your down tube on, and you can verify that your height is set right. If you've done it a bunch of times, you won't need to. But, so you got your power cable. What I do with the power cable is, depending on where it's running from, I'll orient the board so that it's going to be running back out of my way, and then I'll route this so it's not directly tugging on the machine. I'll route it through this support here. That way if it tugs, it hopefully just tugs on the tension around that post rather than directly from where it goes into the unit. This is the drop tube. Some people use flexible tubes. I use a solid tube. I keep it in a tube of ABS plastic. It just helps keep the oil out of your vehicle and keeps everything contained. The end sticks out, obviously, but you can wrap a towel around it or put it somewhere it's not going to matter if you get oil on something. You'll also notice if people always want to help you like unload your car. Well, maybe not always, but hopefully always. And when they do, sometimes they'll just grab this thing not knowing what it is and they'll drop it into, you know, dirty bedding or dirt or something, and you get all kinds of dirt in your drop tube and it's all gritty. You don't really want that in your drop tube. So I keep it in a big piece of ABS plastic with a cover on the end. You can just glue that on there with some plumbing glue. So once you've got this, then you can mount this up again. If you have to set the height, then what you want to look for when you're mounting your drop tube for the first time and you're deciding where you want to mount this thing each time, the drop tube should be just above the level of the wood. So if you look down here at the bottom, I can't really get my finger through it, but it's swinging freely. That's about where you want it. It should be only a few millimeters off the ground. And I'll show you when you mount the handpiece what it'll look like. Because when you mount your handpiece, you want it to rest freely on the ground. About like that. If it was too high, this would kind of just fall off every time you turn the machine off to get another sheep. And if it's too low, then you're going to have trouble reaching up to get things like when you're going up the neck or other positions where you're having to raise this handpiece further up, which is not going to reach because it's going to be too far down. So make sure that the bottom half of your down tube is just off the surface of the ground, and it'll make shearing a lot easier. I think that's about it for the construction of it. If anybody has any questions about how I built it, I'm not like making up plans and giving those out, only because of the liability of doing that. I show these because I want people to be able to build their own. I want them to understand how this works so they can build one for themselves. But just know, building this thing is you're building something that if it breaks, you could get hurt very, very badly, right? Anybody around you could be hurt very, very badly. So make sure that everything you do, you're confident putting that much weight above your head. It's basically just a bunch of metal, right, that could fall down and hurt you. So that's something I have to like really, really emphasize, is that if you are going to build one of these, make sure whoever's building it for you or helping you or doing the welding or whatever, make sure they have some knowledge of how strong structures need to be to support this kind of weight and this kind of torque. Because when you're pulling down on this, for example, right, it torques on it quite a bit. And you'll know if you go to test it out, you'll know like, this doesn't seem strong enough, right? If what did I say? Oh yeah, so the reason that we have this mounted into this board, right, is so that this can be portable. A safer way of doing it, in most cases, would probably be to create a bracket for this motor and then mount it to somebody's, the upright in their barn or some solid piece of structure, a physical structure that exists on the farm that you're going to. A lot of places I shear don't have structures. They just have all these sheep out in a dry lot or on a pasture, and they run them into a little pen. There's nothing out there, so that's why I brought this, or that's why I made this. Bought all the material to make it, because there was no other way I'd be able to shear at those locations. So for really remote things or people who don't have a lot, this is something that will allow you to shear in those locations. If anybody has any questions, you can go to my website. Currently it's just my full name, trevorhollenback.com. There's a contact page there. You can email me. My phone number's on there too if you need to call me. But yeah, I hope this is a help for those of you wanting to build your own stand, and thanks for watching.